Ever wonder how a massive company with thousands of employees doesn't just collapse into total chaos? What's that invisible blueprint that takes a messy group of people and turns them into a well-oiled machine? Well, it all comes down to a few core ideas about management, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack right now.
Here's what we've got on tap. We're going to start with the main problem, just managing the chaos. Then we'll meet the two titans who really tackled it first. We'll dive deep into Taylor's scientific bottom-up approach and then explore Fayol's administrative top-down blueprint. After that, we'll put them head-to-head to see where they clash, and finally we'll see why their century-old ideas are, believe it or not, still running our workplaces today.
So, let's start at the very beginning. What's the fundamental problem that management was even invented to solve in the first place?
I mean, think about it. The second you get a bunch of people together to work on a common goal, you're basically inviting inefficiency, confusion, and a whole lot of wasted effort. So the core challenge has always been this: how do you build a system that brings direction and purpose out of that potential mess? The solution that started to take shape was the set of principles of management. But here's the absolute key. These aren't rigid, unbreakable laws like in physics. Not at all. Because they're dealing with something way more unpredictable: human behavior. They have to be flexible guidelines, things that are constantly being tested and adapted to fit whatever the situation is.
So, who were the brilliant minds that came up with these foundational answers? All right, let's meet the two key figures who really shaped everything we know.
On one side, we've got Frederick Winslow Taylor, who we'll call the scientist. This guy was obsessed with productivity right there on the factory floor, a total bottom-up approach. And in the other corner, we have Henri Fayol, the architect. He was a practitioner, focused on the big picture, on overall administration. He looked at the organization from the top down. So right away, you see two very, very different ways of looking at the exact same problem.
Let's start with our first titan, and you'll see how this all builds. We'll begin with Taylor, the man who literally wanted to turn management into a science.
This quote from Taylor, it just says it all, doesn't it? His entire philosophy is right there. It's not about guesswork or doing things the way they've always been done. Nope, it's about precision, about analysis, and about finding the single most efficient way to get a job done. It's optimization above all else.
So how did he actually do this? Well, his core idea was science, not rule of thumb. Forget tradition, forget gut feelings. He brought in a systematic, three-step process. First, you investigate how the work is actually being done. Second, you unify all the best, most efficient parts you find. And third, you standardize that into a single, best method that everyone has to follow.
A key technique he used was the method study. You know, you can think of this as the direct ancestor of the modern assembly line. Taylor's belief was simple. For any job, no matter how small, there is one best way to do it. And it's management's job to find that way. And right alongside how to do the work was the question of how long it should take. With time study, Taylor would literally get out a stopwatch to figure out the exact time a task should take. Now, this wasn't just about making people work faster. It was about setting fair targets, calculating labor costs, and creating incentive programs, like paying people more if they produced more. Now, I know this all might sound a little cold and mechanical, but Taylor's ultimate goal was something he called a mental revolution. He truly believed that by scientifically optimizing work, both the managers and the workers could win by sharing in the profits of all that increased productivity. His idea of harmony, not discord, was all about replacing conflict with cooperation. All right, let's completely shift our focus. We're going to zoom out from the factory floor all the way up to the corner office. Let's talk about Henri Fayol, who wasn't looking at individual tasks, but at the entire organization as a whole. So, Fayol came up with 14 principles of administration, but let's just focus on 4 really crucial ones. First up, division of work, the idea that specialization makes people more efficient. Then, unity of command, and this one is a biggie. You should only ever have one boss. That way, you avoid getting conflicting orders. Next is the scalar chain, which is basically your classic org chart, a clear line of authority so everyone knows who reports to whom. And finally, Esprit de Corps, this belief that managers have to actively build team spirit and morale. But Fayol was a practical guy, not just a theorist. He knew that a strict hierarchy could really slow things down. So he built in this really clever exception he called the gangplank. What it did was allow employees on the same level to communicate directly in an emergency, as long as their bosses were in the loop. It's this brilliant little escape hatch to stop bureaucracy from getting in the way.
Okay, so we've seen both sides of the coin. Now, let's put them in the ring for a direct comparison to really nail down where they're different. The contrast here is just so clear, right? Fayol's ideas came directly from his personal experience as a top manager, so of course he focused on the big picture of administration. Taylor, on the other hand, was a scientist. He was running experiments on the shop floor to boost worker productivity. You've got the practitioner looking down from the top versus the scientist looking up from the bottom.
So, these guys were writing over a century ago. Why are we still talking about them? Let's take these old principles and connect them directly to our world today. Honestly, their influence is everywhere. Every single time you see a fast food worker following a super precise series of steps to make your order, you are seeing Taylor's one best way in action. Performance-based pay? That's Taylor. Process optimization? Taylor again. But then you look at Fayol, and the very structure of most modern companies, with a C-suite, with clear departments, with formal org charts, that is a direct descendant of Fayol's administrative blueprint. So, the crucial takeaway here is that these principles have lasted because, well, they work. They give managers a framework for using resources efficiently. They help people make decisions based on facts and analysis, not just a gut feeling. They provide a fundamental toolkit for organizing human effort that's just as vital today as it was back in 1911.
And that brings us to the big question for today. In an age of AI, automation, and remote teams, which of these foundational ideas about efficiency and structure are truly timeless? And which ones are going to have to be completely reinvented for the future of work? It's something to think about.